I wanted to always be the example for people with disabilities. Within UNICEF, the idea behind it is always leave no child behind. So we're looking at the most vulnerable children. I work in child protection section, which is looking at emergency responses for children. But also looking at governmental policies. I've been helping people from birth up to 24. There's certain things that have been made to exist that are only for people who are able-bodied. So when I can't do those things, what then do I do? What is the narrative that I have to create to be at the same level in equity as other people who aren't with? Because those feelings are so inhibiting and so overwhelming. They can make you self-sabotage and just stay in one position. I really struggled with mental health, I struggled with my identity, and I started to experience depression. This idea that you have to be sad, you have to be in anguish. I know as humans we want to be these consistent, determined beings, but that consistency is tricking ourselves into creating realities with certain pathways. If you change your destinations, you are changing your ego.
So you see, I don't usually do this, right, with the little card of notes, but I decided for the beginning I need to bring this up.
Yeah.
So first of all, UNICEF Zimbabwe National Youth Program Officer, Global Change Makers Alumni, Council Member Art of Health, Percussionist. Matt, you've done so much and you're doing so much. Why?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Don't know?
I think it's both intrinsic and extrinsic. I think intrinsically I've always wanted to help in some way. I just never knew how. I think the society and the system we were brought up in Harare was very much linked towards leading and linked towards being the person at the forefront. And I attempted that, and that wasn't who I was. I was more a collaborator, more a person who works with people and links people together. And there wasn't really a role for that. So I just kind of like chucked stuff at the wall and saw what stuck. And I saw things that really mattered and stuck with me and stuck for me were linked to the creative arts and linked towards advocacy. So it was more a thing of how can I link these two together? And I think one of the really cool things is the council, the Art of Health Council. I'm now a former member, but when I was a member, it was a really positive outlet for looking at issues that we face as Africans, or for me, it's as an African, but this isn't an international council. So looking at how the youth can use the arts to foster some kind of positive change. I think we're the generation of people who are here to heal, to help and to develop, especially in an African context. What have I tried to do?
So you were a former member. What did that look like for you? If you weren't, you realized that you didn't want to be in the forefront. You feel like you work better in a system. When did that click happen, and what did that end up looking like when you did it? Because I feel like collaboration sometimes is difficult to find people to gel with, for the same intentions. How did you find your calling in that?
Right. I was always inclined academically towards issues. So I'd always look at stuff from different contexts and different perspectives. And I think that's actually what fostered collaboration. The idea that I don't know everything and my perspective isn't the perspective. There's so many other voices that need to be heard within the minority that we are already. And in order for change to be done, it has to be on a scale where everyone is gaining something from it. So I think that's what helped my relationship towards collaboration. It was the intentionality of I need to help people, but they need to know they're being helped, and they need to know that this help won't be eternal. They need to help themselves at some point. So that's kind of the idea behind collaboration. But I can be here, I can be an auxiliary to change. I can change myself, and I can also change someone else and change a system. So you need many hands for that.
So you feel like it's not your responsibility to hold someone's hand to health. It's kind of like you're leading them there, and then they continue the journey themselves.
Absolutely.
Is that like a tough on yourself mentality that you've had, or is that something where you're like, okay, empathetically, I can only go so far?
That's a great question. Jeez. I think it all stems from being in an environment where Okay, I'm gonna start my nonsense. Okay, so I am
All the nonsense. This is the place to talk whatever you want.
I am a decolonial thinker. I think at the core, that's what I am. And so I like to think in my own logic tree in my head that most of the issues that we face are generational trauma based. And most of generational trauma comes from colonialism. So my understanding of it is that so many things are wrong. And there are certain ways to be successful within our society, but those ways are already are in the framework of the blueprint of colonialism. That is the way that you achieve and you succeed. And as a country that's only 40 something years old, I absolutely understand why.
We're babies.
Right?
We're baby.
I'm figuring it out. So I understand that. And I think the reason I chose to go into the cultural space was because it was one of the spaces that was untouched by colonialism. There isn't that much imperative from government or imperative from anyone culturally looking at our heritage. It's always looking at post-colonialism, looking at economic principles, looking at politics. It's not looking at who we are. I think if we look at our identity first and put it at the forefront, then we can fix all these things. And that ties into my idea of help and my perspective of help. It's the idea that you need to know who you are first. And you can know who you are from being cultural, by being music, by being a creative. You start to figure out who you are, or you start to figure out the different beings of who you are and how to control them and what causes what. So absolutely, I think that's my main framing for doing it. It's looking at a colonial system and looking at how it packaged within it and saying, how can we get out of this box? And I can't plan the box for myself. And if I can, thank God if I can, I don't want to leave my other people behind.
You can't leave your people.
I can't do that. So it's all looking at how we can link and create a ladder to escape this box together.
No, I totally hear you, man. Decolonialization. Decolonization. Decolonization, whichever. It's so important because when you look around, everything is being seen from a Western standpoint. So even that Zimbabwean identity or African identity, people are ashamed to flaunt it because there's a standard of this is what is accepted as good, this is what is bad. And it's only because we have that framework, we only have that reference. And like, I have this conversation with people sometimes where it's like, what if we weren't colonized? What would modern society in Africa, like the most advanced version of it, look like? And so every single investment that we make to advancing our culture, we get a bit closer and closer and closer to that.
Yeah.
So like with your advocacy, the mental health, and then connecting the idea of Africanism, where did they overlap?
They overlap in cognitive dissonance. I think that's the biggest thing. It's growing up being told that you have to be a certain way, and then growing up and realizing I'm not comfortable here. This isn't who I am. I think that's where it clicks. It clicks where you're like, I'm in this space and I'm grateful for the privilege to be in this space. I thank my ancestors for it, but I don't want to be stuck here. I need to be mobile somehow. I think that's the intersection. It's longing for something that you work towards to build. I think it's also the foundational principle of anthropology, the idea that you are within culture, but in the same moment you're creating it and also criticizing it, you know?
Ooh.
So I think that's the intersection for sure.
Did you study anthropology?
It was one of my minors.
One of your minors. What else did you study? Because I know you went to school in Netherlands.
Yes, yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was interesting. Okay, so before I forget, I did a double major in political science and economics and global health.
Okay.
And a double minor in cultural anthropology and African philosophy. It was really interesting. It was a super cool experience. I was on a scholarship, so I'm very grateful for that. I thank my university for that. But equally was challenging because I was the only African in my year.
No way.
And I was the one of 3 in my faculty. So whenever we were talking about African principles and stuff, I was the reference point. So it was slightly overwhelming because I felt like I was...
Did you, sorry to cut you off, but did you feel like you had to be an authority?
Absolutely.
Like you kind of...
Yeah.
So did that challenge you to be like, okay, I now need to research and brush up on my African history, my knowledge? Because like, if someone asks me something about Africa, Zimbabwe, I don't know, I don't want to look stupid.
Exactly, yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's exactly what happened. I think within that, when I was researching, I realized there aren't that many sources on Zimbabwe, let alone on Africa or Africa. If you do look at the sources, they're from the countries that got independent post 1950 to around 1965. That's where you see your Ghanaian history, you see your Kenyan history, you see history that almost shaped what the West thinks about Africa. But then you have you have Somalia, you have all these other countries that have got independent, and they aren't being symbolized or referenced within the media or within research. So that really, it made me want to create, because before university I wasn't really creating anything. I was stuck in the idea of I have to make something, but I don't know what it is. I don't know how. And
But you had that itch.
yeah, because again, my main foundation until I was maybe 18 was academia. It was looking at things from an academic perspective and critically thinking about stuff, but not really creating anything. It felt very biased in a way, because when you do that, it's almost like you're criticizing, but you aren't giving solutions. And I don't find that helpful. I think it's an important journey in knowing what to do and and isolating certain factors and variables, but you need to change. You need to do something, change something. And I was doing the itch. I was very uncomfortable, and that's kind of a start of it. How can I create? How can I package stuff that people actually want to listen to? And it got me into looking at digital engagement, into social media strategies, into looking at. I don't think if I write a book about Zimbabwe, people will read it, but if I do a podcast or write a song about it or do a poem about it, or
It's gonna engage in people a little bit.
We're trying to get like alliance and they'll listen.
And
They'll
vibe, absorb the culture.
then like going to a lecture and read a book and like highlight new sources.
It's deep because, like, obviously books are incredible. I love reading and writing, everything. But it is true that the method of communication over time has to change. So back in the day when reading was the primary source of entertainment for people, you write a book, you're a superstar. Nowadays, it's almost like reading is a bit of a niche. Like, it's like people don't really indulge in it. So you're listening to music, you're watching a podcast, throw it on for an hour. Oh my gosh, that's about Africa, you know? Oh my gosh, that song, you feel it. You get the chills. It's like, it's a different experience. And man, who cares what the West thinks? We're so caught up in this mindset of like, oh, like Africa needs to improve because these countries improved and now the West approves. So that's the standard. It goes back to that. I say to myself, who cares? Who cares? Because we have to create our own stories, our own narratives, and with our own narratives, eventually people will notice. But by the time they notice, it's like, well, we're already functional. We already have our system. If you look at Hollywood, if you look at any industry out there, they actually don't care about us.
No,
They come and care about our stories, but
they don't care about us.
so why is it our responsibility to do that? Because it's not. Huh?
Colonialism.
Colonialism, right? It's that mindset. But do you feel like people now as a whole, especially young people, do you think people are becoming privy to it? Or are people still sort of, they have that veil and they don't know what's going on?
That's interesting. I think a bit of both. I think, touch on what you said before, I think we've entered into an era of anti-intellectualism. I think looking at books and looking at how maybe book sales are going down, and also just issues to do with paper and climate change and all these things. I think anti-intellectualism is funneling creators to create stories and to document culture in very new and exciting ways. And I think with that, it almost packages a certain sense of rawness and reality. I think the difference in the media is, in the past, you would write something and it would be so concise and so like everything is taken care of. And I think now, as us, because we grew up around social media, we tend to be very real. We tend to want to see very real and raw things, and looking at something that's very edited sometimes, it's almost like, why? What's being censored? Why is it being edited so much? Why
is it so?
You know, like what's narrative behind it? Who's targeted for? But when we do something like this, where it's just raw and open, or you make a song, or you write you write an anthology about something, all of these things are done in such a raw way that you almost feel the imperative behind it. So I think that's what then builds this sense of urgency within our youth. It's looking at how things are packaged and looking at the imperative behind it, and then actually feeling it. It's one thing to be told something is important. It's another thing to realize it's important. And I think when that dawn happens on you, it's incredible. Then that ties into our discussion on cognitive dissonance, the idea that, oh, I see the vision there, but I don't know how to change myself to get to that vision, but I want to get there. And I think that feeling, that moment, that experience is the educational experience, where you go and you read something about something you didn't know after you heard about it, or you go and research more. Or it all comes from the prettiness that we get through the creative arts that we make.
When you're experiencing that cognitive dissonance, and like when you're at that point where you're saying to yourself, I really, really, really want to do something, I have no idea what it is. That integration period of like trial and error, how many things did you like put your hand, like how many parts, like did you try painting, did you try, you know, singing, did you like, where did you find your pocket of life to say like, because I believe everybody has God-given gifts, and everybody, not like, oh, some people are more special, everybody has gifts. It just means like it's almost like there's a concentric circle, and at the core it's your gift. And there's all these rings around where you're just like, you don't like, what is this, but the more you go and you find it and you're like, wow, that's me. So like that circling of the rings, that like stumbling, searching period, what did you try? Like, what did you experience?
It was so scary. It's one of the scariest things I've ever experienced in my life. I think a big inspiration of mine is Childish Gambino. And also growing up, I think I'm also a big Marvel fan. So I think one of my ideas was looking at, okay, I want to create something, but it can't just exist in isolation. I need to create a world. I need to create a universe. And the way that I can communicate in this universe is through different outlets of media. So I remember this was maybe 2023. I would want to graduate. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was considering doing another year of school just to stay there. It was a year of security. And I remember I got out my journal when I wrote a box, and I was like, okay, I want to make an impact. I want to look at our culture. I want to look at our arts. I want to look at our minorities and see how we can interwove them into a narrative that is pro Zimbabwe, but also beyond Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe, to me, is still a colonial project. A pro Bantu region where it's more linked to our culture and our anthropology and less linked to our progression within those pockets of our reality. So I started to make beats. I like how they're like big beats. Such big beats. I've always had an odd fascination with music. It's very strange. I feel music and I can never really explain it in words what I'm feeling, but I can feel a movement. I can feel a rebellion within me when I listen to music, especially if I listen to our music just pre-colonialism. So and also looking at your Thomas Mafumos and your Chonisos, and when you listen to them, it's almost like there's so much pain, but there's so much hope. And it used to pain me that when I would listen to them, I would feel the same way they felt 30 years ago. It would, like, I never understood why the evolution never took place. And then I realized that the main reason why these people were so big was because they were actually being funded by international agencies. They were like their studios, their record, they were all international, and that's why they made it. Which makes us look at our own national policies to do with our music and our creativity, and looking at why they're not a functioning system of the state. And we all know why. I may not say it in this podcast, but we know the big censorship that happens within the country that we stay in. So you can't institutionalize that without censoring people. So I'm happy that right now we're at a point where it's uninstitutionalized and there aren't that many parameters around it. And I took advantage of that. So just making beats was my first thing. It was making people feel the message first. I won't say anything, but just feel an uprising within you. And then once you felt that, what are you going to do about it? Right? So after that, I started doing blogs. My blogs were linked towards identity, so looking at our totems, looking at the history of totems, but also looking at totemic structures within Bantu regions and cultures, looking at how these ideas integrated within current things that we kind of do within climate change, how we're looking at ecosystems and living together These are all issues.
Your brain's crazy. I understand your brain as well. I'll do it because I'm like seeing how it works, like all the connections, and it's very cool to watch. Please, but these blogging continue.
You're not official. No. Yeah, I think so. I guess, yeah. Issues of identity linked towards totemic structures help us not only understand our own roles within our society, because as you said, we do have roles, but also looking at how our roles coincide. And because it always fascinated me how violence happens within nature, but that violence is necessary. But when we are as humans and we create the systems that we create within our own logic structures and philosophies, there's certain violence that is not great and acceptable. And why? And the answer is always humanity, right? But what within that humanism is stopping us from having the same violence?
So when you say violence, you know, you were talking about a rebellion. You can feel rebellion in your soul when you listen to music. So does that rebellion make you want to go act violently outwardly, physically, or violently as far as like we have to be invigorated and very focused on the change, very intentional about the change that we're making, be disruptive to institutions? Or are you talking physical violence? Because, you know, honestly, both. People can argue both. It's like at a certain point will people listen if you're not being physical, but also that shouldn't even be the case. It should be something that you can have to, you know, communicate. You mentioned the how the programs were funded by international investors. I didn't even know that. I had no idea. And it explains so much, but that's also, it is indicative of the structures that are in place now, because you had the example. That was 1980.
Yeah.
That was so long ago. What happened to the studios? What happened to those things? But similarly to how you said there's this age of anti-intellectualism, it's also the decentralization of art.
Everything. And art and everything. Yeah.
You can make beats on your own accord.
In your bedroom.
Back in your bedroom. And they can be so good. And you can become a star off of that alone. You can start a podcast. You can make a film. You can do whatever you want. And I think that's very, very powerful for us, because we don't have to now, if we do want a Bantu solution, not just this, if we want a Bantu solution, we have to also individually say, how am I expressing myself without asking someone to give me the permission to express myself?
Yeah.
Because that is breaking us. That's destroying us. So when you were blogging, how was that experience, like expressing yourself? Because for me, for example, I don't read a lot of blogs. Right. And you mentioned how reaching an audience now, it's like you have to do it in a way where it's accessible. So it's at a show or online or whatever. Did you find that blogging was kind of difficult to connect with people? Or is it more like an expression for yourself? Or
Right. Okay. I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions.
Go on.
Okay. So the first one was about violence. I agree with you. I think violence is needed for sure. I think right now our violence needs to be intellectual, and it needs to be on a creative level. I think the more that we create that exists in a shared consciousness of the internet, the more tangible that solution is towards us in reality. I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, I am a big fan of violence, of physical violence, but not right now. In my life, but I'm a big fan.
You know Aaron, have you heard of Aaron the plumber?
Yes,
Dude, you're good at Aaron the plumber right now. You want I love it.
Violence we need violence, but I think the reason I'm not pro-violence currently is because I don't think we have anyone to look up to at the moment. Like
there's no leader who you want to stand behind.
Like absolutely, rebellion needs to happen, but there needs to be a personality behind whoever you're fighting for. And I don't think that exists right now. I think right now we're fighting for ideas, we're fighting for principles, we're fighting for freedom, we're fighting for expression. That's what the fight is for. And you can't fight anyone for them. Actually, if you find someone for that, it will take longer to achieve. But it's more fighting what the structures in place are stopping and preventing that process right now. Fighting those systems collectively, which is why collaboration is so important for me. And then once we challenge the systems, we can then challenge the people in those systems by first having our own people who we can fight for. So I guess that's addressing my perspective on violence. And blogging was interesting for sure. And as much as I'm a big fan of digital media engagement and strategy, I've always been fascinated by algorithms, but from a philosophical perspective. So looking at how can we stay true to ourselves when we are created within a system that already has its own narrative? Because yes, you are expressing yourself in a free way, but you still have to package those things within certain, like whatever the parameter of the social media platform that you're working on, it has to be different. Like on TikTok, it has to be like vertical, and it has to be short clips, and on YouTube, it's horizontal, and it's this massive like masterpiece. And so just looking at how, okay, we had these things that we can use for sure. I think for me, the reason I started to do blogging was it was more of I'm going to have stuff written down. I might address this in other media that I do later on, but it's written down here. And if you want a reference point, it is here. It was interesting. I wasn't writing when I started the blog. I wasn't writing for the blog. I was actually uploading my old essays from university for my first or my second year. I thought it would be a cool almost encyclopedia to have of just stuff I've written that hasn't been published by anybody. So I guess that was the first guiding principle. Just I've already researched stuff and I want people to know what I've researched. I think that was the guiding principle, but also looking at what can this research lead to, and that leads towards the beats and leads towards other things that we'll talk about later. But it was interesting. It wasn't that hard. I got a lot of assistance. There's a man who runs Afro bloggers, and he picked up one of my articles and he put it on his Twitter, and that was really interesting. It got me a little bit of a niche following. I haven't been consistent on my blogging. I do have to be honest. Once my UNICEF ran out, they ran out.
It's like, okay, cool. I know that.
But I guess it was just
It's a transition.
it was a snapshot of time of what I was thinking about at that moment, and it's still there. I don't think I'll remove it at any point.
It's a time capsule. No one can take that away from you at all.
Yeah.
So for you, how does that tie into when you're doing your youth advocacy? These are all very, I don't want to say difficult concepts to grasp,
Right.
but I think for like how, for example, how old are the kids or the youth that you work with? Like, what's the range? Let me start there.
Right. Okay. Before UNICEF, I was working with youth who were from birth until 18. Within UNICEF, I've been helping people from birth up to 24 sometimes. That's kind of my age range. Yeah.
So when you're doing that, like, what does advocacy mean and look like to you?
Right.
Are you talking about these concepts to them? Are you like, or is it bare bones? Hey, these are people who don't have access to things, and we're helping them have access. Because honestly, I don't really fully understand the scope of your position. So maybe you could tell me like a little bit about what does the day-to-day look like, and what was your ultimate mission, and how were you feeling like you were helping people
Right. Sure.
and are helping people?
Yeah. For sure. I think within UNICEF, the idea behind it is always leave no child behind. So we're looking at the most vulnerable children, the children who are in the most inaccessible areas. That's the main target. And then obviously once you help those children, the solutions from then start to almost cascade to all the other children. But once you focus on the most vulnerable child, that it has the most impact, but also you are dealing with a majority of the chunk of the problems. So I work in child protection section, which is looking at emergency responses for children, but also looking at governmental policies. We work close with the Ministry of Public Service, Labor and Social Justice. We work with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, because all of these things, they're almost a trifecta for a child. Like you're born, you have your birth certificate, you're born in a hospital. After a while, you go to school, and you're in school until you're 18. So these three ministries are kind of that's where the bulk of looking at children's access to provisions, that's where it's all based off. I guess in my work, I'm very focused on disability inclusion, which is a hard idea for people at work to understand, because it was very weird for them to have a person who has a disability to want to advocate for disability, because it almost seems like a a window dresser of sorts. Like disabled problems go to the disabled person. But for me, I felt like it was super important because if at all, I'm the person who understands more than anyone else what they're going through. So it's less an issue of I'm a window dresser, more an issue of I understand entirely what you're going through. And within my own study, but also within my own existence, I can relate and then help and impact in some way. So disability inclusion is my main
That must be very inspiring for the kids you work with, man.
and for myself because I never experienced I never thought I never thought I'd have the opportunity to impact so many children who are like me. Because when I was growing up, I never really when I was growing up I had the privilege of going to I'm gonna call them able-bodied schools. So I was always the odd one out. So in a way, it was super overwhelming because I knew that I had to prove why I'm here. So that was the main thing that I was doing when I was in school. But also I had to almost exist within my own narrative because there's certain things that exist. There's certain things that have been made to exist that are only for people who are able-bodied. So when I can't do those things, what then do I do? What is the narrative that I have to create to be at the same level in equity as other people who I'm with and who I share these spaces with? I remember I wanted to always be the example for people with disabilities, but I never knew how. I remember growing up, my main thing was I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, which is looking at my trauma, it's hilarious now. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon because that's the surgeon who would help me. So I wanted to help people like me. So as a child, that was
It was the direct,
but it was packaged within trauma, right? It wasn't an idea of, oh, I actually want to do this. It was an issue of I can't do this, but if I can be in a position where I can make someone be able to do this, then I'll do that. It was all based within pain. I think a lot of what I do is based in pain and loss
and therapy.
and trying to help people evade those things and almost rise up from those feelings. Because those feelings are so inhibiting and so overwhelming. They can make you self-sabotage and just stay in one position.
You said you want to help people evade those feelings. Is that some of these things when you're living in a certain way, can you evade it?
Absolutely.
So how do you evade it?
Right. So that's my job. So there's certain
Like the word evade is so interesting because it almost feels like, for me, I've found confronting issues like helps a bit more than avoiding it or evading it, because whenever I evade, I found that it circles back at some point and I have to like deal with it. And two-pronged question just to keep you going, because you said that within those structures you had to almost exist within your own world. I never really thought about it in that capacity. Like for you, the day-to-day, you're doing the same things. And did you feel included? First of all, like did other students like make you feel like you're cool, or did people make you feel like an outsider?
In some ways I was very included, in other ways I wasn't. It was very balanced at times. But to go back to your previous question, it was about evading. Right. I love that. I love how you said that when you would rather confront issues because if not, they'll circle back to you. So I'm breaking the circle. That circle won't happen. So the reason I'm saying evade is no. The reason I'm saying this is because I think the reason I use the word evade is because we're in a system already. So to evade that system is to be free of it. So there is no coming back to anything because it doesn't exist, right? So for me, the reason I brought up those ministries was because there's a lot of work that needs to be done by government in order to make these people feel included. These issues are more than just how we feel. It's almost how we're told to live, right? So if you look at children with disabilities in Zimbabwe is a very interesting facet of the population because a majority of these children aren't raised by their parents. They're raised by guardians and caregivers because their parents have to either go overseas or in the diaspora in order to
Take care of them.
of their children. So that's the first problem. And these problems lead to issues of birth registration, issues of not understanding their disability from birth. These issues almost create narrative around the existence of you don't have. This is your existence. So that's the initial thing. I mean, looking at, okay, when a child is now 3 or 4 and they want to go to school, when you go to a school and you have a disability, when you first be accepted by that school, because there's certain administrations that say we don't have the facilities or the services to help your child.
And we're not going to accommodate you for that.
Exactly. And then you had issues where you have these guardians who have to travel so long to get to a school that can actually accept these children. And a bunch of these caregivers have to stay at these schools to help their children with the bathroom or to feed their children. So a majority of these caregivers are unemployed. So imagine being taken care of by someone who is unemployed, who also has to take care of themselves, take care of you, and your added disability.
So it's out of the goodness of their heart, but that's still a burden.
It's a massive burden. It's unsustainable. It's an unsustainable burden. And it's very funny because in Zimbabwe, I think in 1992, we were one of the first countries in the SADC region to actually create policies towards disability inclusion. Mainly because the ministers and the people in power in place had children with disabilities. So that was a good guiding factor. Like if you look at Jairus Jury, you look at all the things we had in the 90s, Jairus Jury was almost the hub of creating bands that were people with disabilities. Like your Paul Natali says, your people who were blind and who had a band for them, they would play and they would come from Jairus Jury. But now you look at Jairus Jury and they're asking for donations. You're looking at the evolution and almost the devolution of Jairus Jury and the devolution of structures that were first accepted and were a priority under a constitution that has now changed. So my job is tackling these things from a policy level and tackling these things from a program level and looking at how we can assist these families sustainably in order to not feel like they are left out by the government's mandate. So yeah, that's the evading. The evading is changing the system, changing the laws for them in order to feel more included within our society.
So since that devolution is happening, is that directly linked to the fact that people don't have a personal investment, like a personal stake in it? You know, because you said obviously at that time it was people who had family members with disabilities that was the push. So have you found that people now, there's just no incentive and so they just banish it?
Absolutely.
Or
yeah, that's what happened. So it's gotten to a point where it's so bad that if you remember the girl child movement from the early 2000s, that is now being repackaged to a disability.
Can you tell me about the girl child?
So the girl child movement in the early 2000s was started because of, in my perspective, because of the horrors of the patriarchy within colonialism. But also, I think they wanted to cut it off at its root. They wanted to try and create accessible, equitable, equal spaces for women to be able to be successful within a formerly patriarchal society. And there were so many programs and initiatives done towards the girl child, stuff like scholarships, stuff like STEM. Like women in STEM is such a big meme now, right? It's from these policies from the early 2000s where they were looking at how we can capacitate the girl child in order to be at the forefront of the future, which in my view, they are starting to become. If not, they are.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy to be a part of that. I'm so proud to be a part of that. But the shift is now changing, mainly because when you look at anything, there's always a push and a pull. So when there was a push for the girl child, there was a pull from the boy child. And we're starting to have these conversations of men's mental health, of looking at how men package their trauma, looking at...
So we're now seeing it from different sides. So like, as men, it was never about the mental. It was always appreciating the emotional, mental side of women. And it was always about men. I'm technical, I'm work, I'm this. And so now we've almost had this inversion. Wow, I never looked at it that way.
So I think if you look at our stats, our suicide stats, I think a majority of them are young men. Young men are killing themselves because they don't feel like the government, or they don't feel like certain programs are made for them anymore, which is so strange because we still live in a patriarchal society. You know, like it's not like we're all equal now, we're still unequal. So looking at those stats is super interesting. But now there's a shift from, okay, we've capacitated and funded and done programs for the girl child, which are now successful, and we've seen the benefits of it. Now let's look at disability. So I think the main reason why I even have my job is because the UN put up a mandate. It's called the UN CRPD. It's looking at, it's a bill for people with disabilities, looking at accessible accommodation for them within workspaces, but also looking at their inclusion within society. So capacitating them, like for starters in Zimbabwe. Now, one of the programs I work in is capacitating schools with stimulation centers for children with disabilities. So you
define what is a stimulation center?
So a stimulation center is a classroom made for a child with multiple disabilities who would not be able to get the care from a teacher in a standard classroom. So you'd have a specialized teacher who would be knowledgeable in disabilities like autism or cerebral palsy or ADHD or disabilities that existed in the past, even invisible disabilities that existed in the past that used to be almost the parameters for a bad student. Because in my view, children who had autism and ADHD,
no one understood it. They didn't.
So, yeah, man. And the rooms went against them. So
it's crazy because reflecting on my time in high school specifically, at the time there were people who just seemed off or they seemed slow or whatever, or they didn't engage as much. And, you kind of look back and you're like, no, that was autism. Like that was something else. That wasn't like, and it's also an African thing where we don't, it's either if you're not mentally like sound perfect, you're either like possessed by demons.
Yeah.
It's like you're cursed or like you're down. Like there's no in between. And like this mental health awareness is something that's so new in our consciousness. And I truly believe that it's elevating at the same time as all of these other movements. As we're becoming awakened to our African identity, we're also becoming awakened to, hey, I can't actually go and proclaim my identity if I don't know who I am.
In fact.
On a personal level, I can't even talk about Africa if I'm miserable every day because I'm trying to figure out where do I stand in all of this, man. And the reason I mentioned how much those kids must be looking up to you is because, like you said, you didn't have that platform. You didn't have stimulation centers. You didn't have anyone looking out for you in that capacity. And now they actually get to see, man, if people are saying, oh yeah, you got the job because you have a disability or whatever, it's like, in my mind, the first thing was like, who better to, genuinely, like, who better to do that than someone who can empathize and directly understand those experiences? Because again, going back to that high school thing you're saying, it's like, even if you try to explain to someone, no, this is what the day-to-day life looks like.
Yeah.
I could never understand. No one could ever understand. And I feel like it would be almost disingenuous if like a fully able-bodied person comes to a disabled community and he's telling him, especially because your message is like, I'm gonna hold your hand and then you're gonna go figure it out the rest by yourself. That one's okay. Especially, oh, that's Zesa probably.
Oh, damn.
Is that Zesa or is that what? It's okay. Yeah, it was Zesa. Zimbabwe, come to Zimbabwe. Especially because your mindset and your statement is a kind of, yeah, we're gonna help you and then you have to help yourself. Can you imagine someone someone who's able-bodied, like, yeah, bro, figure it out. Like, but coming from you, it's like, no, you can do this. You can actually become a youth advocate. You can go on to make change, to do something that is gonna help people. And man, it's almost scary when you go outside and you observe how many people are struggling and there's absolutely nothing offered to help them. And this is where, we're talking about the West and all of this stuff. This is where we can learn from the West. And this is where we should learn from the West. I feel like our minds are in the wrong place. We look at urban culture or whatever and we're like, oh, we want to emulate the cinema of the West and we want to emulate their music. We want to emulate their clothes, whatever it is. Emulate the way they create facilities. Emulate the way they treat communities.
On that, I think the idea you're looking at is maintenance. I think the idea we need from the West is maintenance. I think even if you try to translate maintenance into African languages,
it doesn't exist.
There's like an adjacent, like to maintain something.
Oh, dude, I have a homework now.
No, because it's not like for us, and it's down to just the way that we exist in our nature. Our nature systems, whenever we would create stuff, it was used to maintain. It was stone. Stone never erodes.
You didn't even have to maintain.
Make it and it's done. So the idea of maintenance is so foreign to us that for sure we do need to learn that. Yeah.
That says a lot. That's interesting. Of if maintenance is something that we were never good at, what if we were never meant to ever even adopt?
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking. So again, it goes back to, okay, now if we look at the heritage or roots, what were they doing when they made Great Zimbabwe?
Because it's still here.
Because it's still there. It's still there. That's none of the white maintenance job in life. It is the same thing. So that's what always vexes me. How did we go from that to everything's falling apart? When you go around Zim, one thing that has always like upset me is just that maintenance. Everything is, you almost feel like you could still be in 1990 or whatever. You almost feel, it almost feels like that, but almost post-apocalyptic sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's almost like you look around and you see the landscape, you see the urban planning, everything looks beautiful. And then you look at the buildings themselves. And it's not even like me just being aesthetically, that doesn't look good. I mean, dude, I was driving with my mom and there was a building that was being erected and it was visibly like slanting. Visibly. And that means that someone was paid money, someone got that tender to do that, and they just at some point decided, well, we're not going to put the full effort. So even at the conception of things now, there's no, the concept of maintenance isn't even in their mind. It's almost like people are saying to themselves, well, this is going to be derelict within 5 years anyway, so we may as well just do something with it, you know?
Yeah. No, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, learning maintenance from the West would be great, man. Because a lot of these little issues that we have, a lot of the problems that we adopt as Africans come from just that. It comes just from that.
For sure, yeah.
Man. No, you got me on like on a mental like pathway.
I see your hands working.
Yeah, they work. You know, it reminded me like I actually did a little bit of digging, just a little bit, just a smidgen.
I'm very scared.
And I saw an article, and you had a quote, and it was, if you're from Africa, you're either poor,
Please, yeah.
or dumb, right? Or stupid. You're either poor or stupid. So I want you to tell me, because I know where you're coming from. I know where you're coming from. But I want you to tell me, what does that mean?
Okay. That's great.
Are you agreeing? Is that kid like, oh man, I couldn't have said that?
No. There's a whole story behind it. Okay, so that article, to give a context, that article was it was after I got my scholarship to university, and they were asking me, what are you gonna do? Like, why are you here? What's your vision? And that article was actually done in Dutch and then translated to English.
Ooh,
so that's the first context. But I guess adding on to that, the idea I was trying to let these people know is that I know why I'm here. I'm here because you think I'm poor.
You think I'm poor and dumb.
That's why you gave me this scholarship. I know why you think I'm here. That's what that. Oh my god! Hold on, give me a second. I have to explain this properly. So that was the idea behind it. It was the idea that, and honestly, as a person who works for the UN, it's a hard thing I battle with, just personally. The idea that the intention of funding sometimes isn't always the best intention, and it's always and it's sometimes packaged within certain principles that are still imperialistic. There's still a certain superiority over one another. So that's the idea I was giving. The idea that there's certain narratives that need to be broken, and I'm glad that you pay for that. Yeah.
That Western mindset.
Yeah.
I remember when I went out there, the instant perception of you is, oh, you're from Africa? Oh, do you have lions there?
You're school like an elephant.
Do you school like elephant? And like, it almost, you get taken aback.
You do.
Because you're like, because here's the thing. People in the West think we're so dumb and so uncultured and so ignorant. But we know so much about the world. But then a lot of people in the West, cultured as well, but they don't know anything about anywhere outside of their own pocket.
That perspective is so interesting because I only used to think about neoliberalism and its impact on us as a society. It's almost like people in the West are so privileged, don't have to worry about the rest of the world. They don't have to know.
And that's what I was saying earlier.
It's the privilege they have.
The fact that they don't have to worry about it, that's our future.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was like, why do we care what the West thinks? Because they don't care. If you ask someone, oh, where is Africa on the map? Some people will not be able to tell you. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we have to also, it's almost like okay, cool. That's your stance. You don't want to know. I don't want to know about you. I don't need to know about you. And the more we create our own institutions here in all the industries, we can start to move away from that colonial mindset. We can actually start to create our own culture, to recreate our own culture, just to catch up. Because we're playing catch up, right?
We are playing catch up.
We're playing big catch up.
Yeah.
But the beauty is that we're young. Because you think, like, for example, what did America look like 40 years in type, you know?
Yeah.
What
It was the wild, wild west.
It was the wild, wild
They were sure because of the law.
for law did right. So it's like now I'm pretty hopeful, to be honest with you. Like, I look at the state of things and I don't see it as, oh, woe is us, we're doomed.
No, not at all.
I see it as there is an awakening, and there are people who are dedicated to changing the African narrative.
For sure.
Because no one else is going to do it for us.
But ourselves.
No one else is going to do it for us. And it also pains me how a lot of Africans, we talk about how we're independent and strong, but then we go with our hands out like, hey, please, like, help us, give this, give this. I understand why you're like, look, you have to, I keep going back to this point of like, do it yourself that you mentioned, because it's so real, man. It's everything in life. Like, you go to sleep, you can have a mom, a dad, a girlfriend, whoever. You're going to sleep alone.
Yeah.
You have to wake up and deal with your own things.
Yeah.
And as a continent, we need to deal with our own things. So, like, for example, if you look at Ibrahim Traore, right?
Yeah.
With Burkina Faso, he decided, look, we're not dealing with whatever. We would rather struggle and figure out ourselves, make sure our people are fed, make sure that we have an agricultural nation where everybody is working and we are utilizing our resources to the maximum capacity, versus, oh, we're being helped, but we're disabling our people in the sense that they're not able to now create for themselves, or they're not getting any incentive to work or to get paid. And those are the types of examples where we look at that and we say, if they can do it, how big is the Burkina Faso population? Less than Zimbabwe, right? You look at that and you say, this is a country which has been through many coups. This is a country that has gone through a very tumultuous...
And past colonialism was 10 times worth of
ruthless colonialism. The Brits were polite about it.
So
They're a little bit, they weren't polite, they weren't polite. But they're
compared French were cannibalistic about it.
Yeah.
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 No, for sure. I agree with you. I think for sure, I think we need to look at our leaders, the leaders who freed us, and we need to understand why they freed us. I think that's the main thing. I think as Africans, we're always raised with an array of people who were so powerful, who then became dictators. And we need to understand why that happened and what they were fighting for. And I think a really big insight into that is Zimbabwe's independence was fought to have a seat at the table with the white man. It wasn't to capacitate the black man. That was Mugabe's road to freedom. And we accept it, and we are so grateful for it. But there was no evolution from that. It's fine. Okay, thank you for giving me a seat at the table.
because you have to go one step at a time.
How do I get to the table? Like, there's a seat for me. How do I get there? Or what's in place for me to get there? What do I have to do to then be in a position where I can then have authority over what happens to my people? And those things are what was not done or left undone, or even in some cases were undone the longer that they stayed in power. And we see it in Libya, we see it in Egypt, we see it in Zimbabwe, we see it in Uganda, we see it everywhere. We see it in Kenya. There's so many, and we are now seeing it a little bit in Rwanda. There's so many examples where...
You said we're now seeing it a little bit in Rwanda.
Yeah.
So, but here's my question is, with these leaders, why do you think they end up... I mean, look, we're humans. We understand power corrupts. People get money hungry, power hungry, whatever.
Yeah.
But like on a deeply human level, why is it you think that these people find it so hard to just let go and pass over power?
I think it's trauma. I think people feel indebted. And people want to profit off that feeling. And I think there are people who are well-intentioned. There are people who did their duty. But their duty and the current job description do not match up. I think that's the main issue. I think it's the idea that when you have led for so long, you are then warranted something for D-Day. I think that's the main challenge. The idea of I don't have enough. And all of these are steeped within the West. The idea of social mobility, the idea of having enough for yourself, but not caring about what the other person has. These are very anti-African ideas.
Our whole identity is community. That's always been
Okay. But how do you keep that in place when you are in a country with the Western politics and the Roman Dutch law? How do you balance the two?
Yeah.
You know? So I think that's the main challenge. The challenge is looking at what was necessary now versus then and looking at the solutions. They don't match up.
I feel like there's a degree of fear in it as well.
Absolutely.
Fear in the sense that imagine if you are a revolutionary, right? Because all of these dictators start off as revolutionaries.
Yeah.
To do that, you have to have the whole culture behind you.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like I think there's an element of mentally, they begin this revolution, they gain all this support, their ideas break a mold. And so now they say to themselves, well, I am disabled. And if I give power to someone else, well, they're going to damage all the progress I've made.
Exactly. I'm so happy you're talking about that. It's ego.
It's ego. It's ego that you think that you and your solutions is the only way. No. There has to be a transition, because that's just like when I am 50 years old, God willing,
Yes.
I would be blessed if there was a protege or someone who could surpass me in whatever regard, because it would be absurd for me to think that my ideas would be that fresh and that sharp for so long, because at a certain time your finger gets off the pulse. You can't be empowered that long. Your mind it doesn't.
Context is important.
Context is so important, and if you cannot communicate with your people, you're gonna lose people.
For sure. No, absolutely. I think the idea of egoism is so centric towards leadership personality, but also centric towards development. I think when you are in a position where you are fighting for something, there's a certain creation and a certain destruction. But those things are both very important towards a next cycle of creation and destruction. And it's that little gap where things are being destroyed, where the ego is now being confronted with, look at what you've done. It's being destroyed. Are you okay with that? Is that you? Are they destroying you? And that's what they keep them in power for so long.
They don't see that they are destroying themselves.
Yeah. And everyone else.
And everyone else. And everyone else. It's crazy how it's a continent-wide problem. It's a continent-wide problem.
But I understand why.
Why?
I get it. I understand it.
Obviously, we just talked about power and ego, but like why? Like why is it that every single place, apart from little pockets, have this same issue?
It's the issue of identity. It's the issue of having so much influence from everywhere that you would rather, because the one argument I hear all the time is, you would rather have the devil you know than the devil you don't. I've heard that all the time.
I just don't want the devil, dude.
Right? Like, what is the devil? What is this? The president. Like, you know? No, but people are so overwhelmed and so triggered and so saddened by our current state that they are looking towards the devil and saying, hey, I know who you are. I'd rather stay here than have the different kind of leader. I think the first thing is, that's the first thing. The first thing is the issue of identity. The second thing is the issue of development.
Now that we're seeing women becoming more empowered and also stepping into positions of leadership, do you think that ego problem is going to go down
No.
Do you think that, okay, great, no.
No.
Do you think inherently women are, they have a less egoic mind than men? Or do you think it's just a human thing?
I think it's more human, for sure. I think okay. I think egoism is the idea of self.
Mhm.
That's what it is. So whether you're man, woman, a plant, as long as you're aware of your existence, you have an ego. I think. And I think further than that, it's our duty to be able to match our ego with our conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that, please?
I think there's certain parts to ourselves that are needed for certain tasks in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And those tasks, and to be human is to complete those tasks. So once you completed it, your ego should change to foster a new kind of context for a new kind of change, a new kind of solution, a new kind of thing you're doing. That change is a change in ego to me.
Mm. You said that a lot of your work is inspired by pain and trauma. What does, if you don't mind me asking, what is that pain and trauma look for you? And how does that manifest within yourself? Does it look more like rage? Does it look like sadness? Does it look like shame, guilt?
That's a powerful question. For sure, I think loss and pain have definitely shaped my existence for a long time. I guess being born with a disability is already a loss of mobility. So that was already a conflicting factor from the jump. And then when I was young, my mother passed away. And my grandmother had to relocate from Guru to Harare because this is where all the rehab centers were for my disability. So she had to shut down shop and move her entire existence here. That to me is also a loss for her and the sacrifice, but also a loss of my mother as well. And I think being raised within the system of understanding that people are sacrificed for you makes you feel like you have to achieve. And that was my driving factor for so long, until maybe I was mid-adolescence. It was this idea that so many people have come together to help foster my growth. I am indebted to them forever. And that is such a big burden on anybody.
There's a lot of pressure.
So that was my driving factor for a long time. And that's why I was so inclined to academics. So, because to me, that was my only way I could break through. Like I couldn't do sports things. I couldn't cultural things, yes, but they weren't really being funded that much. So for me, my outlet was let me try to be good at school and then see if I can develop in some way from that. And then mid-adolescence, I think as any family goes through, you start to hear stories about your family that you weren't privy to before, and they change your context of your understanding and your relationship with the people you're around. And I went through that. It was pretty traumatic, and I started to experience depression, and I had suicidal episodes, and I still do. I think for me, my perspective on depression is once you're depressed, you're always depressed. It's more about managing your depression and really being in the moment for your happiness. But that's just how you are, and you have to function within that lifestyle of it. So for me, I really struggle with mental health. I struggle with my identity. With okay, if I'm not good at school, what am I? Who am I? Am I worth anything? Do people love me? I remember I used to have this habit of trying to achieve one thing every year. So my family said, "Oh, but he did this thing this year," and I stopped. I remember I was 16. It was during O levels. I was like, "I'm not gonna study. I'm not gonna study my levels. They're gonna see if she still love me if I don't pass my O levels."
Wow. That is wild.
That was me confronting my trauma of okay.
That's the confrontation. It's also evasion. No, but it's the confrontation.
Yeah, they had such a tumultuous but such a simultaneous relationship, confrontation and evasion. You have to confront to evade. So for sure, because of that, I started to understand that okay, I'm a minority in terms of my disability for sure, but I'm also a minority in terms of my thinking. Not many people think about cleaning themselves, or think about the finality of stuff all the time. Not many people are willing to self-sabotage to see their effects on other people. People are more just, I have to do, I have to achieve, I have to go, let's go. And it's also the hustle culture of Harare, the idea of if you aren't doing anything, what are you doing? Like, do something.
It's like a wapasa.
You know, it's like a
No, but I'm asking you, genuinely. You tried to sell it out, but you couldn't. You're like, I'm not going to study. I'm going to fail. And this guy's brain is like, you know what? No, what you doing, you're not going to do well. You crazy? But yeah, how did that turn out?
No, I think the way our system is that for O levels it's okay. I think studying is more of a prerogative, and it's the reason why A levels seem so daunting to people. I think A levels is where you really have to sit down and have a study plan, and it's almost like, for me, A level and uni are almost similar. Like, just the idea of this is you, this is what you wanted to do, this is your focus, this is how in depth you're going. Study by yourself, type thing. I also did study for my A levels, but it was still just the idea of
I still did well.
I did okay. I did fine.
Did the pressure, because obviously you said it midway through your teens is where you sort of started to take a step back and say to myself, do I really have to be someone for people to love me?
Yes.
Do you still feel that pressure?
No, thankfully I don't. I think mainly because I'm in a position where I am very honest with myself and I'm honest with the people around me. And I think that's so important. I think communication and honesty within my communication is so important in order to let people understand the context you're in and to understand why you're doing the things you're doing. And it's so challenging because people only tend to be on board once you have succeeded or achieved something. So initially when there was nothing, it's like, what are you doing? You're destroying your life. And I'm like, no, you have to destroy it to create. Like, I need to throw this version of Waheed in the bin and be a different person, because this isn't nourishing me anymore. It's actually destroying me.
Yeah, it's a new foundation.
You know? Yeah. And you have to do that. You need to destroy the building and start afresh. And I think the very first time I did that was so challenging. I remember I was so depressed that I was in a family that didn't understand mental health, but it's so funny. All of us have mental health issues, but we didn't understand mental health at the time. And my sadness and depression was taken as rebellion and answer. So I was put into boarding school for a year, and that to me was the worst transition of, I want to feel more loved, and you're actually you're pushing me even further away than where I am now. So that lack of comfort as well, and being in a new space, that's actually when I moved into boarding school was when I started to observe how isolated I was, because at St. John's, at my previous school, it was, I don't know what it was the camaraderie, or if it was the tradition, or maybe just me being there from Form 1, but there wasn't that, oh, you're disabled, you can't do stuff. It was very brotherly, very together. When I moved and now you're around different people and now you're 17, there's already these perceptions and preconceptions that are being derived that people tend to shun, to isolate. But in some cases, if not most cases, it's almost unconscious. It's just them following their unconscious biases and navigating their own world, because my world isn't their world, right? So it was fascinating for me to be that old and to still be bullied and to still feel isolated and to still feel alone in a boarding room of people. But that also made me deeply understand when minorities say, I feel silenced, I feel like no one is listening, I feel alone. Those experiences helped me understand that. Because I feel like before that, it was more an internal disposition, but now it was external. I was seeing that, okay, people aren't sitting next to me, people are moving their room away from me, it was these very small little weird things that you perceive it, you know? So it was fascinating. But also later on in upper six, I found my little siphon of people and I joined the Harare City Junior Council. I was junior mayor of Harare in my upper six year. Wow. And that was my first interaction with government and with council and with helping youth from a position of, it's very weird. When you have a title, people tend to respect you more.
They listen more.
So Waheed Adam, the school student, versus Waheed Adam, the junior mayor, were perceived completely differently. and people tended to listen to me more. And I saw that, okay, this is very interesting, and I would love to come back home and actually do this more. But the issue was always funding within council, because junior council is funded by senior council, and senior council basically has money to run their city, let alone a youth-led organization. So it's also seeing, okay, if I do want to do work like this here, it needs some kind of capacity, some kind of funding, some kind of donor. Which is why I've taken a more international development route and gone with the UN and UNICEF, because there is money to help and there is capacity. And so you're not worrying about where's the money, you're worrying about where am I putting the money? What is that money going to help and achieve? And it ties into our discussion before. Once we stop giving you money, is there tangible change that you can help yourself sustainably? From how do we have exactly. That's exactly it. Like, I can't keep on giving you fish. At some point you need to be capacitated to fish. And it's I can give you an example. With the stimulation classes, it's all done by a Zimbabwean organization called ZAPCA, so Zimbabwe Parents of Handicapped Children Association. What we did was, instead of going to schools and saying let's build another classroom, we first created support groups for parents who have children with disabilities. And the idea was they would be mental health like companions. So you'd come, you'd sit, have dinner together, or go to like a thing together in the afternoon, and you'd discuss your issues as parents with children with disabilities. You'd also start to ration out roles and duties. Let's say 3 people in the neighborhood go to the same school. Instead of 3 mothers going, there's 1 mother going for all of them, and they'll take care of them, as the other 2 mothers go and like sell tomatoes or sell airtime or get money for the family. There's also stuff like Mukando. Mukando is like stopwell, where you all put money to something, and 1 month the family uses that money, the next month is someone else. So they're all helping each other in a sustainable way, which then leads into, okay, we've helped them with their livelihood, we've helped them with their mental health, we're now helping them with education. Let's now help them with registration for birth certificates. Let's help them with their transport. We're developing these stickers for disability, almost like ID cards. So if you are blind, or if you have cerebral palsy, or if you're deaf.
When you said blue, I thought you were going to say if you're a black.
No. If you're blind.
If you're a black, you need help.
Yeah, so just creating these ID cards where when you're going on a combi, you show them and they give you a certain seat for you. Or when you're at a hospital, you show them and you're taken to the front of the line. Or when you go to a school and you show them, you're given as a specific teacher. It's almost reframing the way that we look at disability. I've got the question, but
I forgot it too.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, one doesn't want to be treated like other.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the question. It was my pen.
Yeah. Pain.
Okay, I remember. You could continue.
No. Please continue.
Right.
Before you continue, second question, now that you remembered that, now it reminded me of the question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Which was, as we're winding down, I just wanted to ask, man, and don't forget what you were going to say, but how do you deal with depression, and how would you tell other people to deal with depression? Obviously, everyone's situation is different. The solutions that everybody needs are different. But if you say that, depression, once you have it, right? It's something you learn to live with. Are there methods that you have found which help you? Like, it can even be bullet points,
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing is get diagnosed. Understand what you have. That's the first thing. If you have anything. If it's just like seasonal depression, or if it's just get help from a therapist, or go to a mental health institution, or go to just your doctor and just ask for assistance on how you're feeling mentally. That's the first thing, to know what you're confronted with. I think the second thing is being honest with yourself. I think for a big part, the majority of people may know what they have and they want to hide it. I think that's the worst thing to do. Like, it's not I think the reason I say I live on my depression is you have to stop looking at it as a bad thing, as a hindrance. It's not like an itch. It's not a pimple that you can just pop and it's gone away. I think it's so much of your being that was suspended within this feeling that you now feel like is foreign to yourself. It's almost like you're looking at yourself and you're looking at it from a point of pain and longing and languish. And I think to deal with that, it's not you're a bad person or there's something wrong with you. It's this is who I am. How can I deal with it? And then I think also just I guess this is what I do. I guess philosophy helped me a lot, just understanding how people in the past have dealt with these things.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope and piece of advice, dude. Because philosophy can throw some people into a spiral, dude.
I know.
If you're questioning what is life, and then you start reading Nietzsche, you're gonna.
I know what happened. I know. No, honestly, I think, okay, so I think,
It's okay though. Please keep talking about philosophy.
no, you're absolutely right. Like with everything that's written, there's always a certain perspective and a certain narrative and a certain idea behind it. I think the reason I like to look at philosophy, because I'm more philosophy inclined than I am religiously inclined. I'm philosophically and spiritually inclined, and less religiously. And for me, I think it's understanding. It's almost going through different stages. So, for example, when you hate your parents, read Freud. Like this is easy as that. Like,
It'll help you understand a little bit.
don't base your entire existence on Freud, but when there's a challenging thing to do with family and the way you perceive your family, your mother, your father, your grandparents, the way they perceive you, the way that you then perceive your partners and your friendships, read Freud. Similarly, if you are going through existentialism, read Sartre, read existentialism, understand the importance of nihilism, but also understand the dangers of it. Once you read that, you then go to Camus and you look at absurdism and you look at how, okay, things don't matter. I will die soon. How do I have fun?
So you're studying different branches of philosophy and then finding what you believe is the middle ground. All of
So
that.
not just basing it on one philosophy. Because also you also have to look at our own pan-vitalism, looking at our own culture, looking at how in our philosophy we have a Musikawanu and we are all projections of Musikawanu. I love our culture because it's almost avatarish, where you have your sofa. You have your ancestors and you can tap in and talk to Gogo, who's from 3 generations ago, and you're like, Gogo, I need help with this. I love that so much because I feel that our experiences are our experiences because we learn from them, but also the future learns from us. So something that your ancestors went through, you are going through currently now, and you can get assistance from that. So it's looking at all these different facets of things. And also, I guess you can also look at religion. Religion and philosophy are super intertwined. For me, the reason I don't base a lot on religion is because religion is based contextually within history. And I think some of those things are not as prevalent now as they would have been or should have been in the past. So I can't base myself on something from the past. But I can learn from it and integrate it within other things for sure. So yeah, I think that's it. I think philosophy is a good place to start to understand who you are, what you're doing, why you're here, and to be happier. Yeah.
And the pain, returning to the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Finishing up. Yeah, remember I told you, remember what the questions you forgot, didn't you? You forgot, didn't you?
No, I got it.
You forgot.
I got it. I can continue. So we had left off when I had just finished upper six, and I was junior mayor. And then I went to university, and it was very interesting because it was something that I'd always wanted to do. I remember my goal when I was like in school was I want to leave this country. I want to go far away. I want to see what I can do with my own capacity, not using my father's money, not using my parents' money, just being by myself. I want to see what I can achieve with that. And I got there and it was terrible. The loneliness, the foreignness, the culture, the language, the lifestyle is just so different for me. it was being around all these people who were so free in who they are because they had the privilege to know who they are. And it was me who was just starting to understand who I was. And that was so weird because like, oh, you're free to do that. You can do that here. You're not judged for that. There's no perception about that here. Um, so under just understanding that the West came and they left a certain idea that we are not following. But you go to the West now, and they don't follow those ideals anymore. They have their own new ideas.
So we're following outdated ideals and we're using that as the symbol of perfection.
Yeah.
That's a lost endeavor from
Yeah, no, right? So being there was so tough. I remember my first 2 years were harrowing because I just couldn't find connections. There were a few minorities for sure. I remember I made connections with the girl from Bolivia because our political systems were very intertwined. Um, but besides that, it was very harsh. And I went through a lot of self-isolation. It was also during COVID, so I guess that also kind of crept in. But self-isolation led to self-sabotage, led to me being in spaces where there's literal trash around me. Like I was in depression rooms. That's kind of where I was. And I think that was the peak of my depression. It was being in a place where I finally made it, but what's next?
What's next?
Like, what am I gonna do? Like, okay, my entire like a decade of my life was to be here. Now I'm here. What? I'm not happy. What do I do? So that also was interesting because you are dealing with the privilege of you have succeeded, you've gotten the opportunity, you are now here. And then you have I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel safe here. I don't feel heard here. I don't feel understood here. I don't feel like the work I do in Zimbabwe, I couldn't do in the Netherlands because it takes you understanding their history and their culture and their language. And there's so many things besides just what the law tells you that can come together to assist somebody. I tried to work with homeless people in Leeuwarden, and to work with the bench of school children in neighboring communities. And there was always that distinction of, I'm not understanding your problem. I really want to, but I feel like I'm not understanding it. And that feeds into when you're now solution on basing and you're like, I don't know, like, what is the main issue? So that was also painful, that idea of I cannot help people, but I don't feel capacitated to anymore. Which was the big push to come back home, is the idea of I now have the academic knowledge. I now have the critical thinking that I guess is needed from like a bachelor's degree that people have all collectively agreed upon.
Yeah, this like unanimous global fusion.
It's get a bachelor's.
Get a bachelor. Trust me, you'll be alright. Get a bachelor. Why? Just do it. Okay.
So it was that. The habits, I know as humans we want to be these consistent, determined beings, but that consistency is tricking ourselves into creating realities with certain pathways. I believe that our ego are those pathways. If you imagine your brain as like a slope of sand or a slope of snow, and it's all like clean and like smooth, that's your brain when you're born. And your ego starts to define certain parts, your experiences, your context, your traumas. They create certain parts within that. So now you have all these lines within your brain. And you can only, to go back to who you were before, you need to clean that slate. You need to make it smooth again. And that to me is ego death. I think the reason I'm okay dealing with my depression is because I realize I'm living in different experiences. So this experience is my fifth experience. This Waheed you're talking to isn't the Waheed you saw at school, and wasn't the Waheed who was at primary school. The different version of me. And I think constantly constructing and deconstructing yourself is super important to not only keep yourself modernized within the current problems happening, but also to create space for yourself, and help other people. Because the interesting part about the reality that we live in is it's all very needs based. It's very Alan Watts kind of coded, but the idea that if you need fuel, you're going to drive to neighborhoods where there's fuel station. You're not going to drive to places with like food courts and stuff. Your idea, your reality is you need to go get some fuel. So if you change your destinations, you are changing your ego. And that's what I went through. This idea that you have to be sad, you have to be in anguish, you have to want something so bad that you can then achieve it. But then that's gone. So like,
Oh yeah.
but then that's done. Like you finished that. Let's do something else. So it's that kind of, and that made me understand my pain even more. That it's not just blank pain and blank loss. There's so many shades within that, and those shades you tap into them with the different perspectives you look at it in, and that's through destroying your ego all the time and seeing it from different facets and pathways.
And you can choose different versions of yourself
Exactly.
to pull from.
Yeah.
Because 5-year-old Waheed actually knows some things.
Yeah.
12-year-old Waheed also knows some things.
But there's also 35-year-old, which is also who you guys to learn from.
And they all have like BS that you have to throw aside,
Yeah.
and then chance that you have to
Thankfully, yeah.
And even that's a critical thinking skill, knowing
Yes.
what
The
deserves to
deserves.
stay in your brain and what
Yeah.
shouldn't. I think that for me, whenever I've had issues with my own mental health, it's been that clutter. It's been, I need to clarify my mind right now because I feel like this version of me right now is actually the combination of every single version of me that's ever existed all at once. And I'm trying to reconcile with 5-year-old, 12-year-old, 20-year-old, 25, trying to reconcile. And then when you start to say, oh shoot, when I reacted to that thing that way that day, it wasn't me reacting. That was me when I was 16 and mad at the world.
Yeah.
And now this minor inconvenience has caused me to blow up at someone or to isolate myself and be in a depression room. But in reality, it's like, oh, dude, no, you're not that person anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and I heard someone say recently that you are not, you don't owe any, you don't, what was the quote? It's like, I don't even have to quote it, I can paraphrase it. But basically, every day you get to decide who you want to be.
Yes.
You are not indebted to yesterday's you.
Absolutely.
You are not, and even if the people around you, if they know Waheed, and then tomorrow, it's so crazy. If you tomorrow, like, started dressing differently, if you cut your hair, started dressing differently,
Yeah.
put on contacts, and started talking differently, and decided to like, oh, okay, now I'm no longer focused on this. I'm now going to start thinking about politics, or I'm going to start doing science research now. People would be almost upset at you.
Absolutely.
Like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
To change yourself. What? And it's so mind blowing, man. So that's really cool that you've tapped into that side of yourself where you're like, I actually do not have any attachment to whatever other version of me in the past. So, you know, right now, as we're closing up, this has been such a wholesome, amazing conversation. What do you have in store for your future?
Right.
How do you see yourself? Are there projects in your mind that, you know, obviously you work for the UN,
Yeah.
and that's an institution which is, you know, helping. Do you see yourself creating your own systems? Do you see yourself moving into, I guess you don't know who you'll be 5 years from now, but do you see yourself moving into politics? Do you see yourself creating your own companies? Like, how do you see your future? And also for yourself personally, outside of work, are there sides of yourself, particularly that pain? Are there parts of that which you say to yourself, in 5 years, I actually don't want to be still attached to that issue?
Such a daunting question. For sure. I think, okay, I guess career-wise, I'm hoping to stay within the UN and stay in Zimbabwe. I mean, there's so much work that needs to be done. And I'm happy that I can contribute to that work and impact in some way. I think that's for starters. I think secondly, I am very happy and very grateful that I get to also be a musician on the side. So I'm in a few bands and we're hoping to start doing festivals and
Man, we didn't talk enough.
I know.
For years.
I do loads of stuff. I know.
No, that's my fault, man. I'm like, dude, because you touched on the things. We have to do a part two. Because what I do is strictly music. And we're gonna, do you know Mark Rebier? I think it's pronounced Rebier. We should do that next time. Just put the keyboard, do the keys, and just do it off. Let's just go up.
Work-wise, I'm hoping to still work with the UN or work with NGOs within the country. And there's so much work that needs to be done. To starters here. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of that. And secondly, I'm proud to be a musician and to have opportunities to actually perform at gigs. I'm super grateful for that. I'm hoping my bands release some music soon. We're hoping to do maybe like a live from like a concert or something, just a live recording of that and just put that out. Cause I'm a live session percussionist. Being in studios is kind of weird sometimes because ngomas and mbiras are not Western instruments. Right. So yeah, I'm hoping that my band's release. We're working on it. We're working on it. I'm in 2 bands mainly. Echoes of Siren, led by Sai. She's an amazing singer, amazing songwriter, and the band is freaking cool. You should come check us out. It's great. It's a mix of R&B and jazz, and influenced by African music. Sometimes Igbo music, sometimes Okene music, sometimes Chimalanga music, and sometimes the odd amapiano here and there. Um, and then I'm also in a Fish Helicopter, which is another really cool ensemble. I don't even know what genre it is.
Awesome.
It's everything. We had synths, we had drums, we had saxophones, we had bass guitarists. It's amazing. So we're hoping to record some stuff for you guys. And last year I shot a documentary. It was on skateboarding culture. It was under the Art of Health Council. I was looking at how skateboarders can help us understand our mental health and our physical health, but also can help with urban planning. So looking at our paveways and our bicycle tracks and how we can almost use skateboarders as our navigators for how we can plan our towns better in Harare. So I'm hoping to create more documentaries on just other really cool philosophical ideas that link towards our identity and our well-being. And I think that's it. Whatever happens after that happens, I guess.
Yeah. It's very open. It's open. That's amazing, man.
Thank you.
Last question. I know I said that was the last question. Last question. This one you can answer in like a sentence or two.
Okay, gotcha.
What would you say to a young African man or woman who is trying to figure themselves out? If you could go back to give someone a head start, like, some of the hard lessons that you had to learn in your journey to self-discovery,
Yes.
to mental fortitude, what are some of the things that you wish you heard to give you a little bit of insight or a head start?
You'll be okay. You'll be okay. Learn from your surroundings. There's so much to learn from. Learn from people around you. People are vacuums of knowledge. They have so much experience about life to share. And look at how you can impact some way. And do that. That's it.
Waheed, my man, thank you so much for coming up through me.
Such a blessing.
Such an honor, man.
Yeah.